Who's sneaking around in your charts? Whatever are you looking for? I'm looking for hope. I will bring you hope, old friend. And I ask only one thing in return. Don't get in my way.
Spoilers for House of X number 1 and 2, and then Powers of X 1 and 2, both written by Jonathan Hickman. You see, I know how you humans love your symbolism, almost as much as you love your religion. And I wanted you, I needed you, to understand. You have new gods now. I can't think of more chilling a quote for an issue to end on than Magneto's at the end of the first issue of House of X. Even when it comes to the X-Men, Marvel Comics really haven't been much worse in recent memory, aside from a few series like All New Wolverine and X-Men Red, both ironically written by Tom Taylor. Every comic that has an X-Men team or a solo X-Men character hasn't been much more than good at best, and that's disappointing for a franchise that has some of the best stories and characters to date. People have been clamoring for Marvel Comics to get their act together when it comes to the X-Men. Many, including myself, feel like the Merry Mutants have been unfairly shafted because the MCU hasn't had their movie rights for so long. It shouldn't be lost on anyone that after Disney purchased Fox and gave Marvel Studios the X-Men, that we started hearing about all the goodness that Jonathan Hickman, has in store for us. Now that it's here, and with House of X and Powers of X being 6 issues each, for 12 issues in all, we're kind of a third of the way through. Does it live up to the hype and give us the X-Men story you've been hoping for? Well, I'm not sure yet. Regardless of how this comic event turns out, House of X number 1 is the best single issue I've read to come out this year, without question. It established a new status quo for the X-Men as their own nation, their own culture, and with their own written language, making X-Men and mutants more than just a superhero team, but a people and a people to be reckoned with. Many somber X-Men are finally happy. Mutants seem to be well and good, and some choice mutant heroes and villains are preparing to defend that happiness and peace to the death. What's so fascinating is how the first issue established the conflict of humanity versus humankind. The conflict of mutant kind versus humanity as both a political battle as much as it is a social and physical one. After 4 issues into the event, I'm afraid I think it's failed to capitalize on that, though. Sure, we're only 4 issues into a 12-issue event, but Hickman has yet to capitalize or move on anything he set up in the first issue of House of X. As with the second issue, he only did more build-up. Powers of X succeeds in introducing 2 new interesting characters, in Rasputin and Cardinal, both in their design and personality. But having the 4 different time periods intersect House of X has already sucked away some of the fascination. Because if I know Xavier's attempt will fail, what do I care? And if 1,000 years in the future, what seems to be Earth is no longer populated by mutant kind or humans, what do I care? I mean, I know it's not literally Earth, but it's the last remnants of Earth. I think it's Asteroid X or Asteroid M. I have to go back and look that up. But still, I think Jonathan Hickman foresaw this coming, so that's why he established Moira McTaggart's new mutant ability of reincarnation. That means any of the futures could be one of her past lives as a cool twist. But the problem is that if that's the twist, I've called said twist from the 4th issue of the event. Or even worse, it's just that Powers of X indeed shows the future. So far, both the second issues of House of X and Powers of X are not as interesting as the first of each, and the most recent Powers of X is the weakest of the bunch. This makes me worry that this X-Men event will fall into the same potholes that most Marvel comic events fall into recently. It's been the case with Inhumans vs. X-Men, Secret Empire, War of the Realms, and the dastardly Civil War 2. They all start out strong and slowly fall apart the longer they go on. Admittedly, this event has started off from a higher state of quality and could end at a quality level, though those others started at. But why would we want that? Why would we not want it to be high quality throughout the whole of the event? I'm so worried about this not only because of Marvel's track record, but because of DC's own recent event that I want to love more than I do, Doomsday Clock. With both of these events, both 12 issues long, we find ourselves reading a very enticing and interesting gimmick turned into a fully fleshed out idea. is that these superstar writers don't capitalize on it for such a long time. With Doomsday Clock, it took until issue 8 to actually focus on the story of Superman, when the climactic point was to have Superman versus Dr. Manhattan. The last thing that I want is for the conflict of the mutants establishing their own nation be overshadowed, lost, and put off until there's a third left of the series. This pseudo-trade war with Xavier's magical drugs, the collection of Omega mutants as deterrents, and the creation of Nimrod should not be pushed off to keep world building. When writing a story, there always needs to be a little world building, especially in the first book of a series. And this is the first book in Hickman's entire Dawn of X line. What all writers know is that you shouldn't front load a story with exposition and world building. And the best writers know how to do it without the reader realizing. The first chapter should establish the setting, and the rest comes slowly later. We're settling into information that can only confuse and decrease our interest. I can't stress enough how knowing what happens in year 100 and year 1000, especially after the Phalanx Ascension at the end of Powers of X #2, has annoyed me. I know how Xavier's fight ends, or at least Hickman wants me to think I know, and plans to keep me bored as long as I wait for him to subvert my expectations. This is not to say that the issues themselves or singular pieces are boring. They're not. They're all expertly written, with well thought out dialogue and characterization, with fantastic art, which I realize is pretty controversial. I lean more towards on the good art that I think is good point of view. But as a whole, when put together on a timeline, the story and all loses my interest. And I hope that Jonathan Hickman hurries back to the plot lines and seemingly new ideas he has set up in the very first issue. Powers of X #2 opens with a quote of Magneto, and that encapsulates how I started to feel about this Dawn of X storyline. The longer Hickman builds a world instead of a plot. There is a chasm between you and I, Charles. A gap that cannot be crossed. With each passing day, I fear never will be. I'm going to keep reading this event all the way through, and after I've read through another third, which is after House of X #4 and Powers of X #4, we'll see if my fears are true.